It's time for Windows Weekly, episode 151 with Paul Thurrott. And of course, Paul thinks I'm a tool because I like the iPad. We'll debate the merits of the iPad, plus talk about new releases for Zune and IE and Pink. It's all coming up. Windows Weekly is next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com. This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott, episode 151 for April 9th, 2010. Paul's Tent Pole. Windows Weekly is brought to you by GoToMeeting, the affordable way to meet with clients and colleagues. For your free 30-day trial, visit gotomeeting.com/Windows Weekly. And by Drobo, the original S, Pro, and new Drobo Elite, offering expandable storage products for individuals, small business, and creative teams. For more information and instant rebates, visit drobo.com/Windows. And by Audible.com. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audible.com/Windows. It's time for Windows Weekly, episode 151, in a continuing series discussing the latest from Microsoft, a little company that was started many moons ago by two smart nerds, Paul Allen and Bill Gates. Here to talk about everything Microsoft, our own little nerd, Mr. Paul Thurrott.
Microsoft, of course, was started in Albuquerque, New Mexico, right? Not in the Seattle area, as many people.
And when there's a reason for that, that's where MITS was.
Right.
And in fact, it seems appropriate to start the show with a tip of the hat, a nod to Ed Roberts, who passed away last week. The founder of MITS.
Founder and creator of the Altair and of MITS.
And it was, what was it, Popular Electronics magazine that featured
on the cover,
the kit computer, the Altair on the cover, and
the nerdy little Bill Gates when running across the quad, so excited.
He was at Harvard and he said, it doesn't have a BASIC. We need to write a BASIC for this.
Yeah. When most people were busy trying to find drugs and women, Bill Gates ran off to New Mexico to program BASIC.
Kind of the Mark Zuckerberg of the 70s.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. And I don't know if that's good or bad. And and he Paul Allen, who was back in he was there, but I think they went back. They got together, wrote it. They did not have access to an Altair, so they wrote it in a simulator.
Right.
And I remember reading this.
And Paul Allen, I think, hand coded, the tape,
the emulator,
on the phone,
on the phone,
on the phone. I'm sorry, on the plane to. We've been talking about
to Albuquerque. They were praying that it would work. They had no idea.
It worked. I think it
bootstrapped
pretty much worked. They had to make a couple of small corrections, but they actually got the thing up and running without having ever seen the hardware. You know, much like iPad developers did this week when the when the iPad came out.
Yeah.
Most of them did not have access to.
Although they had an official Apple emulator as opposed to a made-up simulator.
Yes. Well, it is 35 years later, Leo.
Yeah. So anyway, Ed. Sold. So it was the first kit computer. MITS made it. It really began, I think, the personal computer revolution.
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
in college, my buddy Eric Schwartz, who was the station manager at the campus radio station that I was the program director at, and he kept saying, "Oh yeah, I'm building a computer." This is 1977, I think, 76. I'm building a computer, and we said, "Oh, you are such a nerd." And
nerd alert.
Nerd alert. And of course, that's
the computer for the people who believe that ham radios are not nerdy enough.
He was a ham.
Of course, he was.
Yeah, he went on, of course, to a fabled career in the high-tech industry. He did very well for himself. I think he's retired now. And
is he a tie-dye wearing kind of guy?
No, I think he started. Remember, there was a hard drive company called Mountain Computing. It was his company.
Sounds familiar.
And in any event. Ed Roberts sold the company in '77 and had a non-compete, 5-year non-compete. He couldn't get back in the computer industry.
Yeah.
But he got to do what he wanted, which was he went back to school, became a physician, a country doctor, and did that until his death at the age of 68 last week of pneumonia. But what's cool is that Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer went to visit him.
Or Paul. Was it Steve Ballmer? Or
was it Paul? I'm sorry, it was Paul, not Steve. Yeah.
Yeah.
And issued, I thought, a very touching tribute.
Yeah. And these were guys who didn't always get along, which is understandable. I mean,
oh no, Ed Roberts thought Gates was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, as anyone would, you know. But it was nice because at the end there, obviously they had a nice chat or whatever, and it's nice.
The quote is, "The day our first untested software worked on his Altair was the start of a lot of great things." This is a joint statement that they put up on the gatesnotes.com, which is Bill's blog.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're having trouble falling asleep, I can recommend this highly because it is the most boring blog ever written. But this is a nice post.
It's the Gates Notes. What's been on my mind lately? We are deeply saddened by the passing of our friend and early mentor, Ed Roberts, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family. Ed was truly a pioneer in the personal computer revolution and didn't always get the recognition he deserved. I bet you there's a whole generation of people listening to this show who've never heard of Ed Roberts.
Right, sure.
He was an intense man. That's a little nod to the fact that they didn't always get along. With a great sense of humor, he always cared deeply about the people who worked for him, including us. Ed was willing to take a chance on us, two young guys interested in computers long before they were commonplace, and we've always been grateful to him. The day our first untested software worked on his Altair was the start of a lot of great things. We'll always have many fond memories of working with Ed in Albuquerque, in the MIT's office right on Route 66, where so many exciting things happened that none of us could have imagined back then.
Yeah. You know, I've lived in Albuquerque and visited Albuquerque a lot because I had family there. And when you go over to where this office was, it's literally a strip mall.
Right.
And I think it's possible that has this been bought recently? I can't remember if
it'd be nice if somebody put a plaque up or something.
Yeah, like put a museum there or something. But, you know, there was a like a dry cleaner or something there for a long time, if it's not still there. And it's in kind of what used to be, you know, like their combat zone, you know, as we would call it in Boston, kind of a seedy area with, you know, prostitutes and whatnot. So it's such a strange place, you know, for the computer industry to have essentially started, you know, the PC industry anyway. And there it is, you know, in the least likely of places. Yeah, you know, the reason Gates and Allen moved Microsoft back home to where they were from wasn't just because they were from that area, although that was obviously a draw, but it was because they knew that the weather there was so bad that people would stay in and just work. Whereas in Albuquerque, it's beautiful out. So
I read that. I think it was in Stephen Maness's that famous biography of Bill Gates. That's a great book to read. I know it's unauthorized and everything, but until there's an official biography, it's a pretty great book to read about the early history of Microsoft.
Yep.
Okay, well, a tip of the hat to Ed Roberts. We've got lots of news to talk about. You are going to say a little bit about the iPad.
I am.
Okay.
Mostly negative.
You were very negative. I think you essentially called me a name.
What? I called you a name?
Well, I didn't take it personally.
Recall that.
No, you didn't name me personally, but you kind of referred to people who are all excited about the iPad with an unflattering moniker, I believe.
I still love you. You are kind of a tool. I mean,
that's the word. There's the word I was looking for.
You know, let's be honest.
I'm a tool. Okay. Okay.
No, by the way, and this comes from someone who has stood in lines at Apple releases. I mean, I've done this, you know. I think my point about the iPad, not to jump ahead to that, is only that it's not, the hype was so incredible on this thing that, you know, ultimately what we're talking about is, it's exactly what you think it is. I mean, it's just this thing, you know, and I feel like the hype was way overboard for what they released, you know.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll get to the iPad.
No. I think every 3 minutes I'll make a negative crack about the iPad, just to kind of move things along.
Okay.
That way it doesn't all come at once.
You're kind of the kind of Metamucil of this show.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like every time I say iPad, I throw up in the back of my mouth a little bit, you know.
It's my new girlfriend, but okay. We're going to talk about that and more. We've got lots to say, including, of course, our Windows 7 feature of the week and the tip of the week and the software of the week. And actually, you got 2 software picks this week, so we'll get to all of those. And I imagine you'll have something to say about the latest iTunes issues with Windows 7. But before we do all of that.
iTunes issues with Windows 7.
Oh, you can look that up now while I talk.
Okay, I will.
We have a mandate from the audience to talk about that. I do want to mention GoToMeeting from the folks at Citrix. GoToMeeting is a great solution to those of you who are paying through the nose for business travel. According to American Express, the average cost of a business meeting, $1,000 when you include airfare, hotel, cab, hookers. The thing really can add up. That's I just added that. There's no hookers.
It's actually in the contract.
It's not in the copy, though. For just $49, compare that to $49 a month. $1,000 a trip, $49 a month, all the meetings online. And you may say, well, wait a minute, I need to go in person. Sometimes you do need to press the flesh, so to speak. But often those sales pitches, the client meetings could be done in a conference call. Yet the phone isn't quite it. If you've got the GoToMeeting, it brings it alive. It really increases the engagement. It's a great way to show them what you're thinking of, maybe that PowerPoint presentation, the drawings, the spreadsheets. You can collaborate, too. You can work together on documents. I used it, I mentioned this before, it was so cool to rehearse a speech that we were giving, and it was a very fast-paced 60 ideas in 60 minutes, I think, thing, and then, boom, it's perfect for that. We could rehearse over the voice-over IP provided by GoToMeeting or their phone conferencing, that's built in, and still see the presentation. Great for training, too. Let's just get to the point. Try it free. That's the best thing to do. Go to gotomeeting.com/WindowsWeekly. Gotomeeting.com/WindowsWeekly. The good folks at Citrix, as always, have a 30-day free trial. No cost or obligation to you. And that's really a great way to see if this is going to work for you. Show the boss. Show your clients. Have a few meetings with clients and see how they react. They're going to love it. And you will, too. Gotomeeting.com/WindowsWeekly. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Windows Weekly. So I'm
confused, Leo.
Why are you confused?
And not by GoToMeeting,
by the iTunes issue?
Now, iTunes, please understand, it is a horrible, horrible application.
Really is. Why is that? Do you think Apple just cannot write for Windows, or do you think they actively don't want it to work?
I think it's a little bit of both. You know,
but they must want it to work because
I don't. And tell me, because I don't do this, and I'm curious if this is the case on the Mac, but on Windows, if you're syncing anything with iTunes, the entire computer almost shuts down. You can't do anything else. The UI freezes.
Yeah.
If you try to do anything else in iTunes, nothing. It's like molasses. Does that happen on the Mac?
No.
No. It's irritating.
And, you know, of course, Apple's going to say, well, that's because there's a problem with the Windows.
Yeah, not because it's Apple that wrote all that stuff. Right. So, okay, fair enough. I mean, you know, it doesn't happen, say, on the Zune, but, you know, whatever. Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. Absolutely. It's always been a problem. It's using iTunes is the worst part, if you're a PC user, of this whole thing. If you have an iPhone or an iPod.
And you know what? It's really frustrating. You cannot buy an iPad without hooking it up to a computer.
I know. And the other thing that's really frustrating about that to me is that thing is so close to not needing a PC. I don't understand why it would work any other way. You know, some of the stuff is actually better on the iPad. If you want to find iPad apps, for example, I actually think the experience is better on the iPad.
You don't need a computer. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either.
And this came up for me because I'm getting one for my father-in-law who, you know, is older, has mobility issues.
You have a vendetta against him of some kind, apparently.
No. All he does is email and Google searches. And it's something he could have in his, you know, he sits in his armchair in his lap. He has dial-up, so I'm going to get him the 3G version. So, you know, $15 a month. It'll be cheaper than his dial-up. He won't use more than 250 megs. But I have that same issue. I got to tell him, okay, sorry, Papa, but you got to download iTunes on your old system via
just to make that connection. You know, I don't get that.
I don't get it either. It drives me crazy. I feel so bad. I'm actually going to probably have to drive down to Santa Cruz to set it up for him, and I'll put my account in there so he can buy apps. Because he's not going to want to. You have to set up an iTunes account. The whole thing is just a pain in the butt. Anyway,
it shouldn't be this way.
Anyway, I don't know how we got again back onto that.
No, but what's this iTunes issue? I have not heard of this.
iTunes, they updated it for a few days before the release of the iPad, so that it would have features, you know, compatible with the iPad, and apparently caused a lot of people on Windows 7 with this, and Apple apparently acknowledged it issues. But I get more calls. The biggest calls I get are on the radio show are people who are trying to use iTunes on Windows, and it just Microsoft answers problems with Windows 7 and iTunes. I've just installed Windows 7. Blah blah blah. It doesn't work. Blah 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 blah. And my suspicion is that this is what I usually tell people on the radio show. You got to install QuickTime, which is not a good thing. Uninstall everything. Install QuickTime standalone. See if that works.
Yeah, sure.
And then install iTunes. I think it's trying to do both at the same time. I don't know. I don't know if Apple found a fix for it or not. I just thought I'd mention it. Just so you don't think I'm such a tool.
There's got to be a better way.
Windows 7, iTunes, and iPod won't sync. There's just such... apparently, it's Bonjour 2.0 that's causing the problem. Why does iTunes require Bonjour anyway?
It must be what they use for some kind of
it's the
streaming
AirShare
device.
Thing.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Pink. What do you say?
All right, let's do it.
All right. Okay. What is Pink?
Leo, as you know, Microsoft has an exciting new phone platform coming this year called Windows Phone.
You're such a Windows tool. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
It is your business.
The two things I appreciate most about you is you don't carry a grudge and you don't take anything personally.
Never.
So,
what is Pink? Pink is it an operating system?
Pink is not Windows Phone, right? Which is vaguely irritating. So they have this other phone platform that they've been very secretive about, and I don't actually know too much about it. Other than
is it Danger? Is it the Sidekick kind of?
It is the next version of the Danger Sidekick stuff. Absolutely. Okay. It targets what I could think of as the tweener market. People who like to do a lot of SMS type stuff and social networking, and it's not going to be one of those full featured phones. It's going to be like a very specific. Well, actually, I guess there's at least a couple of them targeted devices. Inexpensive. And so forth. So, the funny thing about this is people had gotten these invitations to the event that's occurring Monday where they're going to announce this stuff. And, I didn't get one, but I got email from people who saying, is this Pink? Is it this Courier tablet? Like, what could this be? And I wrote back, and it's funny, I wrote this in the comment section of a blog. I said, this event Monday is obviously Pink. It's not Courier. They're not announcing Courier.
What is Courier?
Courier is that tablet.
Oh, yeah. That two-page tablet, yeah.
And then I saw my name, in news stories, Windows expert Paul Thurrott reported today.
Like you knew.
Really, the dumb thing is, it's 6 o'clock at night that day. I did, in fact, get the invitation. So I was discussing this thing all day long. And then I got invited, so now it was kind of too late. Like, I already kind of blew it. But anyway, this is what the invitation looks like.
Ooh. What does it say? It's time to geek out?
It's time to share.
Share.
Like on the back,
Oh, show it in front of the camera, because then we can see it then. Yeah.
I can't see myself.
Yeah, that's right. You put it in front of your face. That would be the best thing.
Perfect.
It's time to share.
I'll wrap it around my mouth.
Is that something like Welcome to the Social?
Yeah, it is something very much like that.
Except I understand what it means as opposed to Welcome to the Social.
Yeah. So, the designs for these Pink phones have been leaking online for a long time. There's a clamshell version. There's like a candy bar type phone. And, but it's phones for young people. So, not necessarily.
I was a Sidekick fan.
Yeah, I would say early on, it's interesting because in some ways they were pioneers of this kind of product, right? But now I think this functionality is just available in so many different devices. You'd be hard pressed to find a phone these days that didn't allow you to access Twitter or Facebook or whatever.
Who's making these phones? Is it one company or is it a number of them?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And I'm not even sure how much I should say at this point.
Are you coming to San Francisco for the event?
Oh, no. So I should explain. They're doing one. The event is actually in San Francisco, but they're having a satellite event in New York City, and they're going to broadcast the whatever the speech part of it is via satellite, and then there'll be people there and with phones we can check out and all that stuff. So, yeah, no, I'm not going to San Francisco. If I was, I would come up to see you. But
so next week, next Windows Weekly, we'll be talking a lot about this. We'll have
I think next week we'll be able to talk about it on the record. There'll be a lot more information and so forth.
Cool. I really liked the Sidekick. The only thing about the Sidekick is it got that bad rap because first Paris Hilton's was hacked, and then they lost everybody's data briefly.
Sure, and the Microsoft response to that, which is I believable. I mean, this is something they bought. When people look at this, Microsoft's phone system was hacked. It's like, well, sort of. I mean, it was the Sidekick that was hacked. It wasn't this their other stuff. I don't think it's ever really turned into anything humongous for them, but obviously when you look at the market for smartphones in the US and so forth, these low-cost devices that are high use by a very young audience, it's a big market. So I guess in that sense, it makes some sense for them to go after it, but I still think that having this other side business is the wrong way to go about it. But, let's find out Monday. I off the top of my head, it doesn't seem like a great idea to do something completely separate, but we'll see. Maybe the point of it is it's inexpensive.
Right. Or it's social.
Or it's both.
Or it's both.
Yeah.
Moving along, IE9.
Oh, actually, before we do that, though, I wanted to talk a bit about, we had talked about this before. I think the original time we discussed it was around the notion of market share, and actually what it was sort of, web usage share, that kind of thing. But, there's been some more data about phone usage, both in the in the EU as well as in the US. And then again, it's really very interesting. And in watching Apple's announcement today about the iPhone 4.0 software, there was a slide they put up where they said, we now account for, I think the figure was 56% of all mobile web browsing, but the data was from MPD, which is US, which they didn't call out. But, even Apple is looking at that as being an important metric for that market, because when it comes to mobile devices, devices that have mobile browsers you can actually use to browse the web, I mean, I think there is a case to be made that that's an interesting way to look at that market. What is it that makes a modern smartphone, and how do we measure, how successful those are? And I think that when I look at the worldwide, market for smartphones, I still, going ahead, I think there are going to be 4 primary platforms, and I think they are the iPhone and Android and RIM with BlackBerry, and then Windows, what will become Windows Phone. And it's interesting to me, there's some ComScore data that shows that in the United States, let me see if I get this right, Windows Mobile is still third with almost 16% of the market, behind RIM, which is number 1 by far with 43%, and then the iPhone. But in Europe, they're actually neck and neck with the iPhone. They both have in the 14% range. iPhone's a little bit ahead. And then, of course, because it's Europe, Nokia is number 1,
right,
with about over 50%.
I have to say, and we're doing this show shortly after Apple's iPhone 4 announcements. What I do like seeing is the competition now really heating up. For a while, it looked like Apple was kind of owning it, and you don't see innovation then. And now, clearly, Apple's responding to Android, responding to BlackBerry.
Now Apple's also responding, which is interesting, right? Because a lot of the stuff I think that happened with Android was, let's do what Apple's doing, but the system will be free, and thus will be available on many wireless carriers, which isn't a huge advantage.
Right.
But now these other platforms have gotten so good that Apple is responding, to what they're doing as well. It reminds me of what happened in the PC market, right? If I know that there were very partisan ways to look at it, but if you compare Windows 7 to say to Mac OS 10 Snow Leopard, I mean, you're talking about these systems that are functionally very similar, right? Both of them have copied ideas from the other, Right. That is the sign of a mature market, The fact that Apple has to respond in that way is very interesting, and it suggests that the competition is having an effect, One of the things that comes out in this market, or I guess it's usage share data, is that even though Android has fairly small usage share, 7% in the US and only 2% in Europe, the growth is by far much, much greater than any other smartphone platform. And it's pretty clear that Android is going to be one of those tier one smartphone platforms. And you use an Android phone. I mean, this is very powerful. So I think it's interesting to me. And when you look at these things, the iPhone 4 stuff, the Windows Phone stuff that was announced recently, obviously we have new version of Android that came out fairly recently. These things are all very similar all of a sudden. It's interesting. I mean, there are advantages to each, right? The iPhone has the Apple ecosystem behind it, the iTunes ecosystem, which is almost impossible to beat, I would say. Android, if you are a big consumer of Google services, I mean, that's going to be your tier one experience. I mean, so it's, they all have some advantage of sorts, but, functionally speaking, I think they're all going to be very similar.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the flip side of this competition is I would think they'd want to innovate to kind of get ahead, but at this point, it looked like Apple's playing catch up with all of the features they announced with 4.0.
Yeah. Well, by the way, not to turn the discussion around, but one of the reasons that I'm really excited about Windows Phone is, and by the way, it only happened because they got their ass kicked so bad.
Right. They had to.
It is an incredibly innovative approach to the market. They really looked at these devices differently and said, rather than do the same thing again, because the original plan for Windows Mobile 7 was, let's make something like the iPhone.
Right.
It will be Windows Mobile. It will have an app store. It will, it will just be.
I would hope they'd want to beat it.
And I would say to this moment still, I was curious today to see if Apple did would announce something that would suggest them thinking outside of the box at all. Mm-hmm. I think as we talked before the show started recording, everything they did is somewhat expected. We're adding multitasking, of course. We're adding folders, which is essentially, icon management. That's one of the big problems with the iPhone. It's awful. It's just pages of static icons.
Right.
This is not a criticism in the slightest. They need to add that stuff. I think it's great, but it shows you how mature the thing is. They've reached the point where they're basically just fine tuning, but also that the competition is caught up because they're reaching the point where now they're responding to what the other people are doing. I just think it's interesting that Microsoft chose to, well, obviously respond to the competition, but not respond by saying, okay, we're going to do that too, but respond by saying, okay, we have these devices, you have a really personal relationship with them. How can we make the experience different and hopefully better? And, we'll see how it goes. But to me, what they're doing is actually very exciting.
Now, Internet Explorer, IE 9. Now you may move on. So the last we saw of IE 9 was at Mix, where they didn't even really have a UI. They just were showing how fast the engine was.
Right. We're still there.
We're still there, but...
Well, yeah, so they announced them. They had sort of what Microsoft always calls a momentum announcement. I kind of despise these kind of announcements.
We now have a momentum announcement for you. What does that mean?
I equate this to, I must have used this comparison before. You're at a party and someone turns to you and says, wow, we're having a great time, aren't we?
Yeah, I hate that.
When you're having a great time, you don't really have to mention it.
There's momentum, let me tell you a really funny joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're gonna love this.
Then you proceed to botch it,
right?
Okay, so fair enough. Whatever. This is what Microsoft does, but really, what it is just saying, look, X number of people downloaded this thing. Developers are hammering the test site. They're submitting bug reports, which we love. We've submitted bug reports of our own and tests to the W3C about around HTML5 and how things render, how browsers render things, and how we think there should be a standardized way to do that and all that stuff. So there's really nothing to say other than, in mid-May, about a month from now, Microsoft is going to release another update to the browser, a second platform preview. But again, it's not going to have the UI. It's not going to be about any of the end user stuff. It's really going to be just, they're improving what they're working on, and I'm sure what they'll show will be better numbers along the ACID 3 rendering score and all that stuff. I mean, so I think what they're just doing is making sure people don't forget they're doing it, because I don't think it's coming out anytime soon. I still look at this and think this is an early 2011 type product. It's not coming out this year, probably. If it is, it's going to be very late in the year. And, it's going to take some time. So I think they're just trying to beat the drum a little bit and say, hey, look, we're not going away, but, we don't have much to say quite yet. Momentum.
The Big Mo. I guess they don't call that the Big Mo.
I will tell you, I've had some embarrassing and arguably unprofessional meetings in my life, work-related meetings. And the worst one this is not the worst one, but the second worst one, I would say. I was with Keith Furman. We were down in Tech Ed probably, and we'd gone through this mind-numbing series of meetings. And it was a lot of momentum stuff. At this particular event, they just didn't have anything new to say. And so let's say it was 2002, and Windows Server 2003 was going to be the next big version of Windows Server, so it was coming out soon. It's 2 years after they released Windows Server, Windows 2000 Server. So we're going to have a meeting with the server team. So what are we going to talk about? So we're sitting outside on this bench of where we were going to meet, and I looked at Keith and I said, listen to me. If this guy utters the word momentum, I'm going to slowly close my laptop, and then I am going to beat him to death with it. So because
You're
I
so
wanted
fun at events.
yeah, because I wanted to hear about the next version, not the last version.
Momentum.
So we go in the door, and they close, and we sit down. I open my laptop, and the guy says, I wanted to talk to you today about some Windows 2000 momentum. And Keith and I just looked at each other and just burst out laughing.
Well, at least they're consistent.
It's like, you got to be kidding me. Like, but that's how they're so predictable,
Yeah.
Oh,
Big
well.
Mo. The Big Mo.
Momentum.
Momentum.
Yeah.
I noticed that I got my new Zune software pushing down.
Yeah, so this is for the Zune HD, the firmware update.
Yeah. What's happening here with this?
This is kind of interesting, and it's interesting on a number of levels. I mean, obviously, when you look forward to Windows Phone, this is some of the stuff that will be happening with regards to media playback on the phone as well. So you kind of look at it from that perspective as well. But they've added some features that were in the PC software, like Smart DJ and Pix, right? To the device, so you can do this stuff on the device. So Smart DJ is kind of like Genius Playlist type stuff that you might have in iTunes. But it becomes more powerful when you have a Zune Pass, because these playlists can examine your music. You can say, I want to make a playlist based on this artist or this song or whatever. And it can create a playlist that includes songs that are up on the service.
And download it. And just download them.
Put them on the phone.
Yeah.
And you can do it from the phone.
You can.
You can stream them live.
Oh, cool.
That's really cool. I mean, and that's a great example of this integration that they have between the services, and the device, the software, and all that. And it's neat. And now you can do it right on the device. So before you'd have to do this in the PC software, sync it to the device. Now you can do it right from the device. That's
really nice. This is still a huge advantage that Microsoft has.
Yep. It's one of those things nobody knows it's there. Nobody knows.
And I thought by now Apple would have announced something.
Right.
Nothing.
And by the way, I can't remember anymore if we had this discussion right here in the podcast or before, but when you think about this iPad that just came out, you think about iPhone 4.0, the software. Did they mention anything about wireless sync?
It doesn't do it.
Like what? It's
well.
Really?
Wait a minute. Let me think. You can buy songs directly on the devices.
But why can't I bring the device into the room with my PC and sync over the Wi-Fi network?
Yeah, you have to hook it up.
That's ridiculous.
There are third-party apps that will do it with documents, but not...
No. It's good. The whole thing should be wireless. I understand for big stuff, the initial sync, especially when you're talking about like an iPod type device where you have lots of storage.
Right.
You don't want to sync your entire music collection over the wireless connection necessarily. But the way the Zune does it is so intelligent, because if your Zune is plugged in and being powered up, it's just automatic, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to kill the battery if you're charging, obviously.
Right.
So let it go overnight. Who cares? It's so intelligent. I just don't understand, why that's not part of it. Anyway, one of the other things you get with the Zune HD 4.5 update, and even among Zune owners, I have to think this is a tiny percentage of people. So the Zune HD audience itself is pretty small. But then when you add in the part of that audience that actually has a Zune dock and connects it to a TV, where you can output the device contents to the TV, right? Like you can with an iPod or iPhone or whatever, and emulate in a very basic way what is available in the Apple TV. They've added some capabilities to that. So again, speaking to an audience that is probably pretty small, I would say if you are a Zune user of any kind, you may know that previous to the Zune HD, one of the very cool things you could do with this device is plug it into a TV, and it would actually give you the entire UI on the TV, right? So you could navigate with a remote control your actual device You're not just outputting a movie or a TV show. It's the entire UI, right? It's nice. Now, when we moved to the Zune HD, that changed because the Zune HD is a touchscreen device. And so you can't really navigate the UI in the same way with the remote control. So what they did on the Zune HD is they actually give you a second UI that you only get when you plug this device into a TV, but it has to go through a dock now. So that's the extra piece that you need. So there's an additional cost to that, obviously. The way it worked before the Zune HD 4.5 update came out is that you would get just your basic playback experience. So there would be a simple menu for music and videos and I think podcasts. I think that was basically it. And what they added with 4.5 was Marketplace. And it's not the full Marketplace, but it does give you access to all the music stuff. And again, if you have a Zune Pass, which, again, we're really stretching things here. So you have to have a Zune HD, you have to have a Zune HD dock, and you have to have Zune Pass. But if you have all that stuff, you can stream any of the music from the Marketplace to your TV and through your home theater system, wirelessly.
Why do you need the dock?
Because the dock has the HDMI output for HD TV.
That's how it gets the TV.
Yeah. It's possible they might make a cable that is just the connector to.
Isn't there an audio? There should be an audio out or something. I mean, you just
there is an audio out, I guess.
Right.
So the dock actually has a standard audio out. It has the optical audio. It has HDMI, and then there's a power cable. But if you have all this stuff, and again, I know I'm stretching the
well, anybody who has a Zune is going to have the Zune Pass, I would think.
No, so I think a lot of people do. But I honestly, Zune dock.
The dock is expensive. I think a lot of people.
Yeah, it's probably $70 or something.
Yeah.
It comes with a remote control and all that stuff. It's a nice little system, and it doesn't get the credit it deserves. But once you put all this stuff together, it's nice.
I know, I'm with you. Of course, we got all the parts.
Yeah, I do happen to be one of those people because again, I am myself a tool, as you pointed out.
Hey, what about me? I got it. I'm a worse tool.
I think we can agree to that. But I feel like I'm. What's the opposite of preaching to the choir? Like the crazy guy in the park that no one listens to.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's you.
If you just went with the Zune, everything would be great.
Life would be so much better if we were all Zune users.
Yeah, not exactly. I'm looking at the menu now on this monitor. So actually, it's music, videos, pictures, radio, and now what they've added in this version is Marketplace.
Cool.
And what the Marketplace gives you, it's not the full Marketplace. So you're not getting that kind of Apple TV type of experience where it's not just beautiful looking, but the entire store. But what it is music.
I meet people all the time who get a great satisfaction in not following the herd. They use the Zune and they're proud of it. So, see, I don't use an iPod, or they use Linux. Sure. I don't use, Windows. And so I think that there is probably this contrarian group that uses the Zune and really gets all these benefits.
I would be leery of being contrary just to be contrary, right? I mean, I think of it a little more pragmatically, that there are certain advantages to the Zune platform that just aren't available elsewhere. Just as there are certain advantages to the iPhone, iTunes, iPod stuff,
Right.
It's whatever is most important to you, I suppose. You don't get access to the incredible amount of content in iTunes, when you use a Zune. On the other hand, there's no reason why you can't buy music on Zune, on iTunes, and then use it on your Zune HD. You can mix and match. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be so absolute.
Or rip your own CDs or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Xbox 360 is getting USB. What is it? External hard drives for the 360?
Yeah, hard drives. It's USB storage, so it could be a hard drive. It could be a flash drive. Honestly, you're better off with flash, which is kind of strange because they're limiting the amount of storage you can add this way to 16 gigabytes per device, and they're only allowing 2 devices. Now,
so just put in a thumb drive.
Yeah, that's not a lot of storage, right? I mean, if you have a 250 gig hard drive or a terabyte hard drive, it'd be nice to be able to plug that thing into the 360 and be able to use that for whatever. One of the great unheralded features of the Xbox 360 now is you can actually install a game to the hard drive. You still need the game disc in the drive when you're playing, but what you get by doing that is an incredible performance boost.
Well, and you know, like my Modern Warfare 2 discs got that circular scratch immediately.
Yes.
If I guess I presume that the copy protection would still work. So I
have several discs that I actually have installed on my drive for this very reason. And in fact, Modern Warfare 2, one of those discs is scratched, and I just keep it in my Xbox because it doesn't matter. It's installed to the drive.
Right. Wish they'd had that before. Could you take a big hard drive and partition it to lots of 16 gigabytes?
No, because you can only have two. Right, two 16 gig partitions.
No point in anything more than 32.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Flash storage is much faster than hard drive storage.
Right.
So actually one of the things Microsoft is recommending, and I have yet to try this. I meant to do this before our podcast, but you could install the game, an Xbox 360 game, to one of these flash devices. It should be faster yet again, right? And it's also quieter. You know, one of the problems when you're playing a game on the Xbox is if it's accessing that drive, it's like being in a jet engine. Yeah. So that prevents that from happening.
And could you have multiple sticks? Like I could have 4 games on this stick and 4 games on another stick, and then swap them?
Absolutely. Swap them out like little chiclets or whatever.
So in effect, the stick becomes like the disc.
Yeah.
Except for the copy.
Except that you still need the disc, right, for copy. You know, they don't want you to rent a game, copy it to a device.
No, I understand. That's just like the PC side where you can install a program, but you still have to.
There's also some dumbness, I would say, around, Microsoft. There's a little bit of a market for these external hard drives that you can, you plug them onto the top of the Xbox 360. So I'd have to go look this up now. But when the Xbox 360 first came out, I think it came with a 20 gigabyte hard drive. The mainstream model today comes with a 120 gig hard drive, and you can buy a 250 gig hard drive if you wanted to, a Microsoft hard drive, like an add-on hard drive. And the reason you might want to do that is, well, for installing these games to the disk, which, they take up a lot of space because each of the games is a DVD. So we're talking about, 4 or 5 gigabytes of stuff, per a single disk game. But also, assuming that this takes off in any meaningful way, but Microsoft does have this online marketplace that's someday going to merge with the Zoom marketplace where they sell and rent, videos and TV shows and music and all that stuff. And maybe you do want to have that stuff on the Xbox hard drive, right, for quick access. It can stream content, obviously, over the home network, but, maybe you want to rent an HD TV show or whatever it is using the Zoom, the Xbox interface. The hard drive would come in handy for that as well. But they don't let you just add your own storage, so they sell these things. They're kind of expensive,
right?
But you can buy a WD, 500 gigabyte hard drive
cheap for $60,
like $60.
Yeah.
So you can't just use that on your Xbox 360. That would be really nice, but they just don't let you do that.
Well, I think the idea of using a couple of 16 gigabyte or more USB keys. I mean, how much are those now? They're not very expensive.
Well, a 16 gig key is probably a little expensive for what it is, but it's convenient, right? I mean,
it's fast. Well, and how many games, you could probably put 2 or 3 games on one. And how many games do you play at the same time? Probably 2 or 3. So if you put the games that you're currently playing on, I
want to be very clear about something that you just said. I play exactly one game.
One game,
sir.
I know. Okay. So you got no problem.
I don't 2, 3 games. I have played.
And that's
2 to 3
Ratchet and
games.
Clank, right? You're just a big Ratchet and Clank fan. Many people don't know that about you.
Punch's Odyssey. I'm still stuck.
I love. You know what? I love the Oddworld games. I'd play those. I don't know what happened to those, but I love Abe's Oddworld and Abe's Odyssey, and I would play those again.
Is there a time in that game where you can, from a gunship, shoot those guys down? Because if there was, I would also be interested.
No gunships.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That was going to be a whole platform. Like they were going to have all Oddworld games, and you were going to live in that world. And
that was one of the very early Xbox demos, right?
Oh, so great.
That first Oddworld
The Stranger.
game.
Yeah.
How weird it was,
God, I loved it.
Yeah.
So apparently, if you go to oddworld.com.
I love how multitasking you are.
You got nothing. You get nothing. You get Stranger's Wrath, which was that last great game and it wasn't even an Xbox 360, it was Xbox.
It was literally the Xbox.
Yeah. Boy, it was. I think it was my favorite Xbox game.
Something must have happened there.
Yeah, it didn't sell.
Well,
it was such a great game.
It seems like the guys behind this would be doing stuff, whatever it might be. They must have moved on to something else.
Yeah, I wonder if our chat room knows. What did the? By the way, Modern Warfare 2 is free on Steam this weekend. That can't be right.
No, it's free to play online.
Oh yeah, you don't get to keep it.
Yeah.
Good. Well, since my disc got scratched, this is the only way I'm going to be able to play it. Poor me. Let's take a break because I need to mourn.
Okay.
We're going to come back. We got lots more. Our Windows 7 feature of the week. Yes, Paul is going to give us his. Why don't we just make it like the 1-minute iPad slam? You can do it as long as you want.
No, I actually, I'm not as it's funny. I know in the context of the Apple world,
anything negative is bad.
Yeah, no,
you have to love it,
and I do understand that, but I want to stress something. I don't hate this thing. I don't think it's terrible. I mean, it's
don't
fine.
Backpedal now, Paul.
You're right. It sucks. Screw you, Laporte.
Somebody on this network has to hate it. Come on.
No, I don't hate it.
Even Dvorak is starting to say, "Oh, this isn't so bad."
It's just too expensive for what it is.
Good. All right, there you go. Too expensive.
And that could be fixed.
I'm sure it will be fixed.
That could be fixed.
Anyway, we'll talk about that, and I'd be curious what you think of the at least leaked information about the HP Slate and so forth.
Okay.
The other stuff.
Yep.
But before we do, I have some good news for Drobo users. We've talked about Drobo before. Data Robotics makes this incredible hard drive enclosure called the Drobo, and if you go to drobo.com/Windows Weekly, besides seeing the lovely Manga Paul.
Which we never tire of.
Never tire of it. You will see a great deal up to from $75 to $500 off a Drobo model. Now Drobo is I guess I should explain for those who are new to the game what Drobo is. It is a hard drive enclosure. You can add your own hard drives. Of course, you can buy hard drives from Drobo, but drives are so cheap. One of the real advantages these days of Drobo is as drives get bigger, you can pull out the smaller drives and put in bigger drives, and it rebuilds itself, and boom, you've got a bigger Drobo. So when I first got my original Drobo, which is a 4-drive enclosure, I put like 160 gig in it, a 300 gig, and two 500s. Well, they've all been replaced now by 1.5s, one by one. And I've gone from, I don't know, maybe it was 1.5 terabytes of storage to 6 terabytes of storage easily. It's also redundant. So Drobo will make sure that even if one drive dies, you don't lose any data. Using its own it's beyond RAID, they call it, technology. Increases capacity at any time by adding a drive. You can start with just 2 drives if you want, then go to 3 or 4. Mix and match drives of different sizes. And be able to use all of them, unlike RAID, which uses the lowest common denominator. You can pool the drive capacity together. It just looks like a large volume to your system. It's self-healing. I mean, it's just awesome. People who have a lot of storage needs, photographers, graphics designers, love the Drobo. The original Drobo was great for your iTunes library or your Zune library, your photo collection, your family videos. Then the Drobo S came out. That was a 5-disc bay array. The Drobo Pro for serious users, maybe small businesses, 8-disc bays. 8! Up to 16 terabytes in one. And now they've got the Drobo Elite with 8-disc bays, and it's a SAN. It's a storage area network, which means up to 16 computers can be simultaneously connected, accessing files. They're locked. They're safe. 2 gigabit Ethernet ports for connecting to hosts using iSCSI. It's VMware certified. I mean, the Drobo Elite is amazing. Now, this isn't in the copy, but this is how fast Drobo is updating things. They just announced the Drobo FS, which is, I think, kind of like their Windows Home Server. It has 2 chips in it, one for the hard drive access and one for an operating system so you can run programs over it. Also gigabit Ethernet. Drobo is amazing. If you've got some storage needs, go to drobo.com/Windows Weekly right now. Drobo.com/Windows Weekly right now. And you get a special deal on a populated Drobo. You can find out more about the Drobo. You got Callie Lewis there showing you how the Drobo works. Different Drobo users like Victor Cayo talking about his Drobo. It is VMware certified for use with Windows virtualization for businesses, for home users, for hosting ESX virtual servers, for backing them up. This is a great solution. USB, then FireWire, now iSCSI, dual gigabit Ethernet. This is Drobo. Drobo.com/Windows Weekly. Take a look. And we thank him so much for the support of the Windows Weekly program. Let's see. Moving on. What do you want to talk about? The iPad. Let's talk about that. You have, this is in your notes. Wah, 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 wah. I should play the sad trombone. Because that's basically what you're duplicating.
Well,
here,
I
right?
mean, having not watched it, I assume that you guys were on some kind of iPad high alert for the past week or whatever.
That's all we've done.
But I mean, really, in the context of Apple product launches, I'm not sure that this was the, aside from the manufactured excitement, I mean, I'm not sure it was the big deal.
Well, Apple says it sold 300,000 the first day.
Yep.
I think that's pretty accurate because some of the bigger apps have installed close to 300,000 users.
Okay. But, I mean, according to the Wall Street Journal, that's far below expectations.
They thought they'd sell more. They're not sold out?
The average, the expected first-day sales were 400,000 to 500,000 units.
Really?
And, of course, there was that one guy who said they would sell up to 700,000 units.
Well, one guy said they did sell 700,000. The problem is Apple's not saying. The only thing they've said is 300,000.
Yeah.
Or over.
Well, the
over
first day. They said today they sold 450,000.
450, okay.
But this was, analysts on average had expected first-day iPad sales of 400,000 to 500,000
units. You can't
units.
blame Apple for what these nutty analysts say.
I'm just saying, and by the way, it hasn't sold out. Right?
That's the surprise. I thought it would have sold out.
Here we are almost a week later. They only released it in one country, and it hasn't sold out. I mean, I could go down to the Dedham Apple store today and buy an iPad if I wanted to. That's not what happens with these things. That's...
Well, if they've sold 450,000 in less than a week, it ain't bad. Are you saying, I mean...
No, it's not bad. And by the way, that sums up my feelings about the iPad.
That it ain't bad.
Not bad. It's not bad. I mean, it doesn't justify the sort of exuberance, that we've seen around it.
You don't think it's a game changer?
No, it's not a game changer.
See, I think it's a huge game changer.
But I will say this, and I did write this in my review. It has the potential to become something more interesting, right? It's really interesting to me how people use the same words when they describe the iPad. People talk about how it's a consumption device, not a creative device.
Yeah, that's what I've said. Yeah,
everyone has latched on. Oh, you've used it. Okay, so
no, that's what it is, in my opinion. It's a TV set. It's a fancy TV set.
Oh, except that it doesn't have to stay that way, right? It has.
Well, you want it to be a computer, and I think that's where people hate it.
No. I'm not saying I want it to be. What I'm saying is, it has the capability, because it does have Bluetooth keyboard support,
right,
to become a creative device. Someone like me who travels a lot for work, has to take notes in meetings and so forth. How nice would it be?
Well, you can do that with it.
Only have to bring this thing. Except for, well, I could sort of. I mean, there are some things that need to be resolved, including the storage capacity, which is woefully inadequate if this is going to be the thing that I bring. I mean, meaning the thing. Like, this is the only thing, One of the nice things about carting around a laptop is it includes my entire music collection, all of my videos, So whatever I'm in the mood for, there it is, With the iPad, you have to really, this is what I'm going to put on it. One of the things I do when I travel, if I bring an iPod or an iPhone or whatever, I'll stock it with certain things because, those devices aren't big enough to store my entire collection. When I arrive in wherever I'm going and then I'm there working, whatever I do, and I go to travel home again, I can sync the thing up again and put different content on it for the way home. If you just bring the iPad, unless you're buying stuff online, I suppose, you're kind of stuck, So as a tweener device, right, this thing that's between an iPod Touch, which it really is, it's just an iPod Touch, and a computer, it's interesting because some things get better, but some things aren't as good, and that goes both ways. And you're left with what we sort of imagined. You remember you and I were talking about the iPad long ago, before we knew what it was, before Apple.
Right.
We knew the announcement was coming, but we didn't know what it was going to be. Will it be a little Mac? Will it be a giant iPod? We didn't know. And we were trying to think, what would make this thing so special that it would generate all this excitement? We couldn't figure out what it was. And honestly, there is nothing.
You have one, I take it.
Oh, of course.
Okay. Just checking. So see, that's fun to me. It's immediately apparent that.
What does that mean? I reviewed it, yes, Leo. So I have to have one.
Well, no. I'm not saying you have one. Oh, that means you like it. I mean, I just want to make sure you had one because a lot of the people who didn't, were really negative about it, hadn't used it, and that's that's where it kind of changes for me because yes, it's a big iPod Touch, but when you use it, you realize that this is this is a full-size screen on this thing makes a huge difference. It's much more than just a big iPod Touch.
By the way, it does, but it's good and bad, right? One of the issues you run into, and if you use the thing enough, you'll have noticed this. You're holding the thing with two hands, right? Which is fine. I mean, I actually hold the Kindle with two hands a lot of the time, and it's no big deal. But because the screen is so big, sometimes that thing you want to press is up at the top. And then you have to do this weird balancing act because you have to take one of your hands off the device to move it all the way to the top because it is a big device, And now you're holding it with that one hand and you don't want to drop it because all of a sudden it is kind of heavy, for what it is. I mean, if you're just balancing it there. One of the nice things about the smaller screen is that you can use it with one hand. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to prop it up to move your hand to the top, So the big screen is obviously better in certain circumstances, but it's also a hindrance in others. So it is still the trade-off. I mean, one of the things I would just point out is that for a lot of people, this kind of computing scenario was like brand new. And in the same way that no one knew that Ed Roberts jump-started the PC industry,
right.
A lot of people don't understand. I've been using a tablet for a decade.
I think it's very different because it's not Windows on a tablet. It's a very stripped down, much less complex
I'm not talking
interface.
about I don't mean the UI.
But that's part of it.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the form factor. In other words, for a lot of people, this is it's a new thing. Like, oh, look, it's like this tablet thing. This is really exciting. In the Windows world, we wrestled with these issues a long time ago. The first devices that came out that were tablet PCs were these slate things. And it was like, you know what? Actually, this is too limited to be of any value. And the convertible, laptop was born or whatever. Yes, I mean, there's an argument to be made that Windows is too complicated, that for many people, what they want to do is access, Gmail and browse the web. And
yeah, that's why I'm giving it to my father. Yeah.
And this device makes a lot of sense for that kind of stuff. Absolutely.
I really feel like this is transformative, that you're going to see in a few years, this will be a predominant form of computing device. It's going to replace, for a lot of people, replace laptops.
I see the promise of it. So the way I would put it is, there are things that need to be added to it. There are software updates that can be made. There are price cuts that can occur, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. I mean, it's a little bit cheap now. For example, if 5 years down the road, these things are a huge product category. And people are sort of rewriting history and saying, see, Thurrott, you were wrong. This is a big deal. When that happens, this is not going to be the device. It's going to be significantly different. All you have to do is look at the stuff that Apple announced this week for iPhone 4.0 and compare all the capabilities that are in this phone to when it first came out and see how much things can change. It's the same basic form factor and all that stuff, yes. But, the capabilities are dramatically different. It's amusing to me how people will argue about the dumbest things, like, oh, you say it needs a camera, but it doesn't need a camera, and here's why. And then, of course, when the camera one comes out, everyone's going to drop the one they have and buy the one with the camera, with the dual camera, however they do it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that as it stands right now, it's not hitting any kind of a sweet spot. It's in the middle. And I think it will evolve over time. I know it will evolve over time. The only question is whether, I think the way it evolves is it sort of takes over for the Mac on the low end of the market. I mean, I think it.
I think it's a cop out to say, oh yeah, this isn't the game changer. This is a significant leap. Yeah, of course, there's going to be better.
How is it a significant leap? I don't understand.
Huge.
But how?
Because,
tablets existed and the iPhone OS.
Crappy tablets existed and they didn't sell.
Right.
The iPhone and the iPod Touch don't really give you the benefit of the big screen. As soon as you see the big screen in a snappy hardware device like this, it's a game changer. And I think this is,
I don't think it's
of
a game
course,
changer.
the first PC wasn't everything the first PCs have come to be, but you would grant that it changed the game.
The first, you mean like the IBM PC?
Anything, yeah. I mean, just pick any first generation product. The first iPod wasn't the be all and end all, but there's no question that changed the game, and I think this is absolutely in that category.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
I mean, there's no way to prove it. We won't know for years.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that there is an argument to be made that Apple has been very successful with things. When you look at like the iPod or the iPhone, these are markets that had been done before, not well, and Apple kind of came in and did it right.
Yes.
And you could say that you could make that same argument for the iPad.
Exactly.
I absolutely that. And what I wrote in my, it's a low bar, but one of the things I mentioned in my review is, there's no doubt that this is the best tablet I've used. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
It is a low bar. You're right.
But the question is
it good enough? Is the question.
Well, do we need? I mean, it doesn't sound.
You don't need it. No.
I don't know. I'm not. I don't write reviews for me.
Right.
One of the things I think was very telling about this device is my wife was the one who mentioned this. We had a bunch of 8 to 12-year-old kids come through the house last weekend. Every single one of them saw this thing, asked what it was, and had zero interest in it at all. Zero.
Really?
Yeah, and none of them were interested. This thing's been sitting out on the couch all week.
Wow, that is interesting. That is telling.
Pick up their netbooks. That's what they use instead.
Really? They'd prefer a netbook?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that you can do on a net. And by the way, this will change over time too. But again, we can all rewrite history. But the truth is, as this thing ships right now, my kids play games online. Those games are in Flash. Those things don't work on the iPad. They just don't.
Right.
My son uses his netbook to write things for school, which he prints out and brings to school. And
you can't do that.
Can't print.
Yep.
Now, these are problems that can be fixed. I get that. But I mean, I think that's my point. Apple releases things in a state of unreadiness, and we sort of become beta testers, and we're happy when they release updates, and as we should be. And it's nice that they do that. But, I've seen this thing before. I mean, I think that's my, we did this already, and I know this is going to get better, and it's already better than the tablets that came before it. But I just don't think it's enough of a leap. And one of the themes we've brought up on this podcast a bunch of times is the notion that when you move to something like cloud computing or Web 2.0 applications or these smartphone platforms, one of the benefits that I don't think people appreciate is when you start over from scratch, you get this simplification thing that I think is really important, and I think draws people in. The dark side to it is you lose functionality, Right. So if you move to something like Google Docs, it probably does 5% of what's possible in Microsoft Word. But Google Docs becomes really interesting when it's 10%, and it's that 10% that people really need, And I think that's the deal with these kinds of simplified platforms. Right now, maybe this thing is at 5%. It's like, well, not quite. But is it going to get to 10? Is it going to get to the point where people will pick this over a netbook or a low-cost laptop or whatever? And, will the value equation be better because the thing will be cheaper? I think, yeah, of course it will. What I'm saying is right now, you pay a price for being an early adopter, and it's not just related to the cost of the device itself. It's just you're buying something that's instantly going to be obsoleted. And I don't know. It's okay. I mean, it's good. I just don't think it's fantastic. That's all, as it now stands.
And I love it, but okay. We will agree to disagree.
Yeah, no, sure, of course.
I think it's, to me, it's blatantly a game changer. Will there be better versions? Of course. There's better versions of everything. If there weren't, then that would be bizarre. Well, I think it's good enough here to be a significant. Look at 450,000 people bought it without 300,000 people bought it sight unseen.
That says more about Apple's hold over our society than it does about the quality of the product.
Well, where does that hold come from?
Exceptional marketing. It's a special
smoke and mirrors, drug use. It comes from superior products. You get people buying your products because you have a history of superior products, right?
I don't know that I would say they're blatantly superior, but they are certainly.
Well, people say they are because that's how they vote.
Well, right, but that's like saying the Ford Escort is blatantly superior to all of the cars that were made in the 1990s because it sold more than the other cars. I mean, that's not really how it works.
It's not?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought that's how it worked.
No, that's popular. That's not superior.
Sorry.
I mean, come on.
You're right, and there's often
If
a
that
disconnect.
were the case, then Windows would be superior to Mac OS 10 in your mind.
There's often you're right. There's
Sure.
often a disconnect between what sells and what is the best. You're absolutely
listen, Apple used the word magical, to describe the iPad. There is something magical going on at Apple, and it is a combination of things that can never and will never be duplicated anywhere else, including, by the way, at Apple. Not with regards to the iPad, but with regards to the time. It's a combination of the people like Steve Jobs and the designers they have there, the products they come out with, the markets they decide to go after. Apple, even though they're actually a humongous company, operates like a small company, and they only go after very specific markets. They don't throw everything up against the wall like Google or Microsoft does. And this combination of factors results in this Apple that we have, this company that we see today. And it is something that is not duplicated elsewhere in the industry or in any other industry.
In history, I agree.
Has this kind of a hold, but it is a magical thing because it's a temporary thing too. It's not something that's going to keep happening when Steve Jobs is gone. It's not something that happened when Steve Jobs wasn't there. It wasn't something that Steve Jobs was doing when he wasn't at Apple. It's very interesting. It's this perfect combination, that they've kept it going as long as they have is itself astonishing. It's quite an accomplishment. They can generate excitement over anything. It's really, really interesting. I mean, there's no doubt about it. This company and these people will be studied in the future. The people will learn about them in school, and they make products. You remember, you'll appreciate this one. The quote that Steve Jobs said to John Scully, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? You're going to sell sugar water.
Right.
I mean, Steve Jobs sells sugar water, essentially, right?
Well, see, I would disagree. I don't think that. I think you're asserting that it's all done with magic and smoke and mirrors.
No.
There's no products there. He's not selling sugar water. I think these are significant advances in technology.
I don't know about that.
You don't think so?
It's design, but it's stuff. We're still talking about stuff.
Yes, this isn't God.
And in the case of the iPad, I mean, it's really a combination
stuff.
of
So
ideas.
is all technology. That's what technology is stuff.
No, I know, but you can at least make a passing argument about a phone or a computer that these things serve a purpose and that you might even arguably need them.
Yeah, who would want to surf the internet or get an email or play games or watch movies or read books?
If you could do that no other way, you would have an excellent.
Of course, you could do it other way, but I have no argument with you, but
yeah.
It just surprises me that somebody could look at this, use it, and not say that is a sea change in technology. But
I am amazed that anyone would look at that and say,
obviously, we disagree.
No, because it is clearly just an evolution beyond what we already have.
No.
It is.
It's a sea change.
Leo, I'm going to put a magnifying glass on my iPod Touch, and you tell me what you see. It's called an iPad. It's just a bigger iPod Touch.
Well, actually, that's truthfully not the case. In fact, if you launch an iPod Touch or iPhone app on here that isn't adjusted for the iPad, that's what you're saying, and that there's a big difference.
Yeah, but then you're just adjusting it for the resolution. I mean,
there makes a difference having 640 by 4 or 1024 by 6, 760.
Having an HD TV makes a difference over having a regular TV.
Okay. You don't think HD TV was a game changer? Yeah, it was a huge game changer.
I don't know. I don't know.
It was. Trust me, it was.
How are we defining game changer? It's something that's better than what came before, but is the same thing, just higher resolution? You mean that's the game changer?
I don't think so. See, because there's a synergy to it, to having a television picture that is realistic, as close to reality as opposed.
It's amazing. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The DVD was amazing when it came out. I mean, now they're quaint and low resolution. I mean,
I think the DVD was a game changer. I mean, I guess maybe we disagree over what a game changer is. I think this is as much of a game changer as the iPhone, the iPod, and the Apple II were.
I agree with that.
You see, it's just a semantic difference.
It is as much of a game changer as those items.
There you go. Okay. Now we know. Now we just understand. We have a different point of view. Has Microsoft released a game changer, just out of curiosity?
No.
Well, what is a game changer in your mind? You don't think Windows 95 was a game changer? I thought it was.
I don't celebrate products because they're successful, right? I mean, if you have Windows 95 was a big deal for me personally because it was the first Microsoft product I didn't hate myself for using. And that was actually a big deal. No, and I mean that because in the early 1990s, I refused to use any Microsoft products. And I did everything I could, even to my own detriment, to use alternatives for a long time there. I mean, I understand that whole anti-Microsoft mindset because of this. You know, this was a big part of my...
No, I'm giving him credit,
life.
though. I mean, Xbox 360, Xbox more than the 360. Xbox really changed.
So, you know, I think I would be a little less generous about throwing around the term game changer. I think that the big point behind the Xbox 360 wasn't that it was high definition, because that's like an obvious advance. I honestly think it's the formalization of this Xbox Live stuff. You know,
could be
the stuff that we sort of saw a little bit in Halo.
Yeah.
The ability to do cross-game stuff, you know, was a big deal. And now that they're bringing it to the PC, which hasn't taken off, but also to the phone, you can see the value in it. Now, if we had we gone back 5 years or 6 years or whatever and looked at Xbox Live, would we have claimed that it was a game changer because someday it will be on the phone and thus, you know, it will be a big deal or something? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure I would have described it that way personally, but no, I mean, I you know, the iPod and the iPhone, the iPhone was a game changer. I don't think there's any qualification to that.
Yeah. In this sense, and I don't know I guess how we define game changer. In the chat room, they're saying something that is a paradigm shift. It changes the way you think about devices. And certainly smartphones change the way we think about cell phones.
Sort of. But, you know, again, before the iPhone, I mean, I had
I was a BlackBerry fan. Yeah, I was a huge BlackBerry fan.
You couldn't pay me to go back to that kind of a device. You know?
That's why it's a game changer, right? Because it made smartphones, not only did it establish them as a category, it made them usable.
Well, I mean, you know, one of the signs of good software is you're using the new version of something, whatever it is, Microsoft Office, Windows 7, whatever it is. You go back to the previous version and you hate it because it doesn't have the stuff that you now want. That doesn't mean it's a game changer, but to me, that's a good upgrade, right? I mean, like that's good. You know, you could see the promise, and you can go read my original review of this. I mean, of the original iPod, even though the UI was very much like what was available in the creative devices at the time, even though it was expensive and only worked with Macs and was FireWire based and all that stuff, you can see the promise. You can see the promise. And of course, the way they evolved it, I mean, they evolved the iPod line in ways I don't think that anyone could have foreseen.
Yeah, and it's more than the device was. It was the entire chain that Apple created of purchasing music.
The biggest advantage, and by the way, the biggest argument you could make about the iPad, and I don't think enough people are focusing on this, is the ecosystem stuff. I mean,
oh, well, it's huge.
Looked at it in a negative way. You know, this is another way for Apple to sell you crap through their store. But you know what? Honestly, the iTunes ecosystem, I guess we might call it. They should just call it the Apple Store, but whatever. The iTunes Store ecosystem, the iTunes ecosystem, the sheer amount of content they have, and not just the amount of content, but the type of content. You know, they have things like iTunes U that don't get enough attention. That is just not available anywhere else.
I love iTunes U. Isn't that great?
It's astonishing.
Yeah.
You know. They don't get credit for that. So the iPad as another way to consume that content, that alone makes it interesting. And by the way, that's the reason we're even talking about it, because you know, I'm sure to some people it's like, well, this is a Windows podcast or a Microsoft podcast. What the heck, you know? I still think I can make an argument that most of the people who use iPads are going to be Windows users as well, and that there are issues to resolve around integrating these things together and so forth. You know, you don't get the full meal deal when you're in Windows with an Apple product, because there are certain features that they just don't make available to you. I think that's wrong, but you know, whatever. That's the way they do things. As a member of this ecosystem, the iPad is interesting. You know, yeah, absolutely.
I
just think it's good. That's all.
That's all.
I mean, and then, by the way, so now I'm like the negative guy because I think it's good.
You don't think it's great. What's wrong with you?
Thurrott is such a dick.
What's wrong with you? You know, as long as we've polluted this podcast, do you have any thoughts about iPhone 4.0?
Yeah, so actually, maybe you can clear something up for me. I didn't see all of it, but I believe there were 7 things that they pillars or whatever Apple called them, the 7 points.
I think tent poles is the word he used, which is probably
Microsoft uses the term pillars. You know,
pillars would be better than tent poles.
Do you happen to know what those are? Do you have these?
I do.
So of the things I'd like to examine would be what they're responding to, right? And how, what does the equivalent thing on Windows Phone look like? So what we could compare them, you know.
Windows Phone and I think a lot of this is in response to Android, actually.
Right, but let's, I mean, and we'll mention that when it's appropriate, but, you know, what did they announce? And then let's see what's the Windows Phone equivalent. Let's find out.
Perfect. Let's go through it. Okay. We'll go through 7 of them one by one. Number 1, multitasking.
Right. Now, by the way that they're doing multitasking, absolutely right. It looks fantastic. Just so people understand, it's very similar to what goes on an Android phone, which is you press the home button, you can see what applications, press and hold it, I guess. You can see what applications are running. You can quickly switch to another application. And there's background processing. They demonstrated Pandora, where this was always a real gripe of mine, is that you could keep listening to your iPod while you were doing other things, but nothing else. Pandora, which I prefer, now I can listen to my Pandora music while I'm doing something else. Okay, so here's what I would say.
By the way, Apple, the last company to release multitasking on their phone. Everybody else does it.
Maybe not. You know, we're going to see what happens.
Windows 7 phone may not. Yeah.
We'll see there. So,
and that's what Steve said. He said, this is harder to do without killing the battery, without making a phone sluggish. So we decided to, really take our time and implement it right, which that's marketing.
There's a cynical part of me that would say, they've been working on this phone for 4 years now, whatever. How is it they're only getting around to this now? But but on the flip side, I would also point out, I would give Microsoft a bit of a break by saying it is a new platform. You want to see how this impacts it. So Apple's had a lot of time to build up to this point with notifications, and they've done their own multitasking internally. Now they can release it to the world. I think they're doing it the right way. So I think that what they've done with multitasking is exactly right. It's done exactly the way it should be.
I would agree with you. I was kind of saying I don't want multitasking because I don't like the side effects that I have on my Android phones where it's sluggish.
It looks like it's well done.
Yeah, let's hope so anyway. And what would be really nice is a button where I can turn it off if it does impact performance.
The only thing I would say, though, is what it doesn't do is change the basic paradigm on the iPhone, which is that you into app, out of app, into app, out of app, into app, out of app. One of the problems with a device that has a really small screen is that you're not going to run 2 windows side by side, right? There's no facility for that. Although, arguably, the Palm OS, the Web OS, they did find a way to kind of do that, right? By swiping across. I know it's not exactly the same, but that's an interesting way to handle it.
It also had sluggishness issues, though, as a result.
Absolutely.
That was one of the 7 applications, and the whole thing goes.
Yeah, I was amazed at the poor performance of WebOS. So that's a problem. The only thing I would say to Windows Phone's credit is one of the things that they're doing on Windows Phone is this integrated experience idea, where you don't have to dive into an application to get stuff. So they'll have an integrated music experience where music from Pandora could be mixed on the same screen with music that's on your phone and music that maybe is in other services. This is
that's a good way to handle it, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. So,
even on the iPad, I find as long as you could switch from application to application quickly enough, that solves about 80% of the problems. And there's a few things like wanting to have your Pandora music in the background or having IAM run in the background.
One of the things I would not complain about with the iPad is the lack of multitasking. The truth is, this is the kind of device it is. You're doing something
right.
And one thing
it switches fast enough that you don't really feel like
it's fast. I don't like the in out thing, but multitasking will fix that. But if you're browsing the web, for example, and you get an email, it makes a little buzzing sound, whatever. You have a notification that something's occurred. You can go.
I love notifications. That's one thing to me Android does really, really well.
Yep.
One thing that kind of nobody mentioned, but it scared me a little bit is Apple. Steve's talking about notifications, and he said, since we've added notifications to the iPhone 3GS, we've done more than 10 billion of them.
I saw that.
How does he know? You mean all of these are going through Apple? Oh, I don't like that. He knows what notifications I'm getting?
Sure.
How would he know that? I think they're going through Apple.
It could be, yeah.
Well, that's not good. I don't want Apple to know what's going on with me. Maybe he made that number up, but it doesn't. It sounds like he inadvertently implied that Apple was handling it. Now, somebody who knows the SDK probably knows that there is some sort of push server.
Possible. Well, here's how they probably know. You've seen this dialogue. You plug your iPad or iPod or iPhone into your computer, and you get a little diagnostic dialogue in iTunes. It says, we'd like to send this information back to Apple. There's no...
Right.
That's probably where they find that out.
Yeah, this is they're telling me in the chat room, and if I do remember this, this is the APN server that
That's
Apple
good.
said it implemented because it doesn't have multitasking, so it has to go through there and then come back out through Apple.
I bet that's what it is.
Of course it is. Just a real reminder that all of these notifications you're getting are going through Apple.
Sure.
Hey,
at least they're not evil like Google.
Tentpole number 2, folders. Now, this is something that, again, Android has and I've used on the Nexus 1 and loved.
Even on the iPad, icon organization is terrible.
It's awful.
It's terrible. And what's really funny is, I've used iTunes on a netbook, and one of the problems with that is because the screen is so small, if you use iTunes on the computer to organize the layout of the icons on your screen of your iPod Touch or iPhone, it can't fit. The representation of the iPhone in the software is so big, it doesn't fit on the netbook screen, right? You have to scroll up and down to see the whole screen. It makes it kind of monotonous. So now you have this iPad that's right represented in software inside of iTunes. Even on my high-resolution monitor, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you can't place an icon wherever you want it on the screen. They have to. It starts at the upper left. It moves to the right, and then it goes down to the next row, and they still haven't gotten around that. So they've given you some basic new capabilities around wallpaper, different wallpaper between the lock screen and the background, and that's nice. But by the way, you have multiple pages of icons. How come you can't have a different background on each one? I mean, that would help you visually organize which page was which, wouldn't it?
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? They did mention, and it wasn't a tentpole, that they are going to have wallpapers. Now, since they already have wallpapers, that must mean they're going to have different.
It'd be like the iPad, there's 2 wallpapers.
I just want to name the freaking page so that this is my social media page and this is my health application. I mean, I just want to know.
You use an Android phone, so you know that one of the things you can do is place icons on the screen anywhere you want them.
Yeah, and widgets, which I love.
That's a pretty basic feature. Yeah, so the widget functionality in Android is halfway between, I would say, the static icons that are available in like the iPhone and these, live tiles that you see on Windows Phone and these interactive panoramic, hub type things. Right. So I think that here you're looking at Apple doing something obvious and important, and I'm glad they're doing it. It's nice. The app organization or icon organization on the iPhone is horrible.
They needed to do this. It was ridiculous.
They needed to do something. So it'll be nice. You could have a games folder, or, Okay.
Now, we should mention you'll have to have a 3GS or a most recent generation iPod Touch to use this 4.0. It will not go on the older hardware. iPad will have it by fall, they said.
If you look at the Windows Phone Start experience, such as it is, you have this kind of at-a-glance UI that you get by default, which is the stuff that you really care about right up front, with all live notifications occurring. Not just like a number, like you have 6 emails, but actual graphical information depending on what the content is. And then there's a subpage. And that subpage is a list of all the applications. And that's the iPhone view when you think about it, right? That's the default iPhone view. And unfortunately, that's still the default iPhone view. So they're making improvements, and they're good. But I still feel like it's not moving up to the level that it needs to be at.
I should correct myself.
Truly useful. Yes.
4.0 will be on all the platforms. You just won't get all the features on the older phones. Okay. iBooks, I bet you would be able to buy a book on any platform.
Yeah.
Game Kit. This is really directly in response to Xbox Live, I think.
Yeah, and I literally was just writing about this. So I've got an article that will come out today or tomorrow at the latest about the 7 differentiators that Microsoft sees that it has in Windows Phone. And one of them is games. And the reason is they're integrating the Xbox Live functionality that makes sense into the phone. And there's some interesting stuff that gets done by this. Now, there's the obvious stuff, and Apple's doing some of this stuff, and I'm really interested to see that they're doing this. So the notion of achievements, for example, that you have like an online alias, like a gamer tag with an associated rating and a game score. There's an avatar that represents you. You can play games on the Xbox 360. You can play games on Windows that feed into this system. And if you're online playing any of these games on either platform, you could actually send messages back and forth to the people in your friends list, right? But they're adding it to the phone on the Windows side. And it's interesting because there's actually a single programming environment called XNA where a developer can create a game that runs on all three platforms. It's technically possible, I'm not sure how feasible this is, but that you could play in the same game with people on these other platforms at the same time. But I think the more likely scenario, and this is actually kind of interesting, is you could be playing a game on your PC or on your Xbox 360, and then, you know, maybe it's dinner time and you have to stop playing or whatever, and so you save, you know, it saves your location or whatever. And then maybe the next day you're on the train going to work, you can pick that game up on the phone and continue from where you left off. Really interesting, right? I mean, that there's something really powerful there. So it's unclear yet how far Apple is going with the game stuff, but as we mentioned earlier, again, this might have been before the podcast, but when we were watching the live Apple announcement, it's certainly conceivable and possibly even happening already that you could create a game that runs on the iPhone and on the iPad, and that people playing the game on either platform could be playing with each other at the same time. And that gets really interesting.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing you want them to implement.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah. And, you know, I have to say inspired, in this case, by the Kindle.
Game changer?
No, I don't know. No, not a game changer. But inspired by the Kindle because of the Whisper Sync and the ability to read a book on one platform.
And it is so effortless and so perfect the way that works. And the Kindle, you know, of course, is available on those devices that Amazon makes. It's available on the PC and on the Mac. It works particularly well on a tablet PC, for whatever that's worth. It's available on the iPhone. It's available on the iPad. And it's available, I think, on BlackBerry and maybe other platforms as well. And the really nice thing about it is, especially in the case of a book, you're reading a book. Typically, you want to do it on a big screen, whatever it is, the actual Kindle or the software on a PC or a Mac. But maybe someday you're standing in line. It's a long line. And wouldn't it be nice if you could read that book for 5 minutes? Oh, but you didn't bring the Kindle with you. Well, if you have it on the phone, you know, you load the book up and it says, would you like to sync to the last previous read spot? Yes. And then you pick up right where you left off.
Love that.
Awesome. Awesome.
So that's the game kit.
Yep.
And this is the thing that you and I were getting a little head up with before the show began. iAd. Now, the background on this is that Apple is trying to buy a company called AdMob that a lot of iPhone developers have been using to embed ads in their apps. Yeah. Google stole it out from under them. So Apple's created their own platform. Same idea, though. Embed ads in applications. I guess mostly they would say for free apps. So the app is ad supported.
If that's the case, that's
okay,
fine,
right?
But as we discussed previous, when I spend money on a Wall Street Journal digital subscription,
I don't want to see that.
If I have the New York Times Reader, which you pay a lot of money for, by the way, and the price for both of those things just went up dramatically. I think they're $20 a month now.
Yeah. Almost.
That you were being confronted by an animated full-color ad is somewhat disgusting, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, isn't that the point that you're paying for it?
You know, this bugged me with the CNN app. It was paid app, and there were ads in it. But as you pointed out, newspapers still have ads. Even when you buy the newspaper, magazines still have ads. Somehow it's not as intrusive.
But they're not intrusive.
Yeah.
You know?
Jobs talked about, and this drove me crazy. He said, well, we think you'll have an ad every 3 minutes, and most people use their apps for 30 minutes a day, so we're talking 10 ads. We expect 1 billion ad impressions.
Really? Because I would see 2 ad impressions,
and then
there would be this crumbled mess of chemicals on the ground because I would have destroyed my phone.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah, I am not interested.
Well, we do ads. In fact, we're about to do an ad, but
yeah, but we don't charge people for the podcast.
No, and we don't do one every 3 minutes.
Yep.
I don't
know. I used this example earlier, and maybe this is not a great example. Certainly, there aren't a lot of examples of this, but you can pay extra for Hotmail, $20 a year, and you get no ads. I like that. I want Microsoft to do that with SkyDrive. I want to be able to pay for it, get additional storage. Yes. And I don't want to see ads.
Yes. We thought about offering ad-free podcasts. In fact, a lot of people ask us for that. It's just too hard to implement because we'd have to put in copy protection or somehow keep people from distributing the ad-free version. And we know from Dignation, when they had Dignation, you could pay and you'd get early access to it. And, of course, people immediately set up mirrors so that everybody was getting early access.
No, this is a case where the medium, I think,
Yeah, it's a different medium.
How you handle things. I know from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times perspective, I'm sure their argument is people pay for the subscription, but what really pays for it, it's sort of subsidized by the ads.
Yeah, that's true for the print paper. For sure,
But you know what? Even though book publishers have argued otherwise, and I'm sure the newspapers would too, it's a lot less expensive to distribute this stuff digitally. And by the way, someone else is doing it for you.
Right.
For free, from what I can tell. Or not for free. They're taking a percentage in Apple's case, whatever, for next to nothing. So I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there should be ads in these things. So again, yes, if it's a free version, neat. I would say one of the things they're doing right on the Windows side, not that Microsoft would ever turn down money, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them go the ad route themselves. But for now, the one thing I can say about Windows Phone is they're implementing this thing like a try before you buy system for applications. Anyone can take advantage of it. The idea is that, say you wrote a game and there's 10 levels in the game. You can offer 1, 2, 3 levels, whatever it is, as a try before you buy. It's a free trial. It's something that can be available for any version of the app. So typically in the Apple App Store, a game is free or it's not free. And sometimes the developer will actually create a separate version to get around that system. So on the Microsoft side, there's a formalized notion of here's the free version. It's a subset of the full version, that kind of thing. And that to me is a nice way to do it. I don't, I guess if you're going to put an ad in the free version, I'm okay with that. But if I ever spend, $10 on an app or more, or $3 on an app, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't want to see ads in the app. I hate that. I just hate that. Especially in such a tiny screen.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think the market will absolutely weigh in on this one.
This is going to be, I bet the feedback from this bit of this is going to be slightly negative. I mean, I think when you look at what they're doing, all of it's, like I said, semi-obvious and good news and glad to have it. And then you hear about the ad thing and you're like, wait, what? Like, what are you selling me on here exactly?
And we have to remember that this event that they did in Cupertino really was for developers to encourage them to develop for it. So this is all a positive thing for developers. There's a new monetization platform.
Yeah. And there was a slide early on. I didn't have time to kind of linger on it, but it had all the words of all the stuff they were adding, right?
Yep.
It might be interesting to go back and look at that because I think there'll be more end user stuff going on there than say the.
They said hundreds of new features. So
yeah.
We just saw the tent poles.
The tent poles
because they were sticking up under the covers, and we couldn't miss the tent poles. But you're right. If you, in fact, I'm looking at GDGT's site, and there's all of this stuff. Data detectors, calendar access, in-app SMS, date formatters, photo library access. There's a lot of stuff.
Yep.
1,500 new APIs. So what this will mean is that we'll see new applications with new capabilities.
Yeah, that stuff looks great.
One thing Apple's done very well is
5x digital zoom, finally.
Yeah, but digital zoom.
Well, of course, because it has to be something that works across all the devices.
And they don't have
the
zoom
optical zoom is a function of the hardware, right?
Yeah, and you're not going to put that into these things. So.
Right.
Sync IMAP
This
notes.
is all, by the way, Bluetooth keyboard.
Yep.
So if you want to be the really light traveler, you could, take notes on an iPhone.
Pass.
Well, I listen. I could picture doing this. If my eyes weren't so bad, and if I didn't write about Windows.
I wrote this entire book on an iPhone.
If you could do it, how nice would that be?
I guess it'd be better than nothing.
Yeah.
I've spent way too much time keying stuff in on Android and iPhone. I start shaking. It's like I get frustrated. It's like, and pretty soon I start sending messages with. My fingers are fat, and then I start sending messages with the typos because it's like I'm screw you.
I don't even care. Yeah,
and my messages are gibberish.
Deal with it.
Deal with it.
It should say at the bottom, sent with iPhone, but like iPhone is mistyped.
There are people who put that in their signature. They say, "Sorry, I typed this with an iPhone, and please forgive any mistakes."
Nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
Windows 7 feature of the week.
So that was it. That was all 7. That was all of them?
Yeah, that was the tent poles. We're done with the tent poles. You want more tent poles?
No,
That's it. There's 7 tent poles, and I gave you all 7. You have more to say?
That's good.
I think people are sick to death of it.
I agree.
Moving on.
But as the perceived negative person on the iPad, I just wanted to point out I think most of what they did announced for the iPhone 4 software looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really curious what happens with the hardware.
Yeah, we all are, but I think that will come in the summer.
Yeah.
See, what I'm nervous about is Windows Phone.
I didn't mention Exchange support, heavy business support. You probably wanted to talk about that. I know you're big on the enterprise.
But multiple Exchange support's a big deal.
Huge.
Not because of Exchange, but because now everyone's using this Exchange protocol to get over-the-air push synchronization of calendar, contacts, and email.
I do. With Google. I use it, yeah.
Google Mobile uses it. Everyone's going to be using this. So that's a big deal. And I know on Android they support this. And on the iPhone today, you can only have one of those type of accounts. Now you can have more than one. So that's fantastic.
Better data protection. This is something that they have to do. Otherwise, enterprises will not use the iPhone. Yeah,
and this is something I don't actually have a huge handle on, but there's sort of basic Exchange support, which is what we just talked about essentially, except for one account. You synchronize these different data types with the server, but there are different levels of Exchange support. And when you look at something like REM and Windows Mobile, they offer the full support. iPhone offers a little bit less, and then Android offers even less, although they do multiple account support. This is going to be a big deal going forward. Although I just had a little meeting yesterday with somebody, and one of the interesting things that's happening in larger businesses is that they're kind of giving up, when it comes to smartphones, because people have certain expectations and they want these phones. And I think their basic deal right now is like, look, just don't sync any, important corporate data beyond the email stuff, and use whatever you want. I think there's an interesting thing happening there, but yeah, the more they can do, the better. I mean, it's just going to, allow them to get more corporate adoption. So
they have to. So it's interesting because if you parse this all, it really is clear that some stuff's aimed at Amazon and the Kindle. Yep. Some stuff's aimed at Google and Android. Some stuff's aimed at Google and AdMobs, the Google ad platform. And some stuff is aimed at RIM, particularly this enterprise stuff.
And at Microsoft.
And at Microsoft, stuff. Yeah. And the games. And yeah, so this is where...
There's something for everyone, Leo.
There's something for everyone. Now, this is why competition is so good.
Is too small.
But that's why it's so good and why it's so important that you have competition, and that it's so good that the iPhone isn't 100% of the market, which it was getting perilously close to.
Yeah.
Competition forces Apple to do these things.
Yep. Oh, no, I always listen, I cover Microsoft for a living. Believe me, I know that competition is the greatest thing that's ever happened to this company, and it's going to be true of other companies. It's easy to get lazy.
Yep.
When no one is coming after you. That's how things like IE6 happen,
Right.
You need competition to keep you on your toes. The reason Windows 7 is so great is because Windows 7 was such a perceived disaster, and the whole world, was upset with them. The reason Windows Phone is so exciting is because Windows Mobile was such a dog, It was so bad they had to start over from scratch. Well, that creates something wonderful, Competition is fantastic. It benefits everybody.
Let's move. Now can we move to Windows 7 feature of the week?
I'd like to go back to the iPad briefly. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
It's a new feature. It works well with the iPad. It actually doesn't play with the iPad. That's the feature.
Do the iPad feature of the week.
No.
But I kid.
You kid. You're a kidder.
All right, let's move on.
Windows 7 feature of the week.
Yes.
I think I said that. Do you have a feature? Do you want me to read it to you? Problem Steps Recorder.
I understand.
What is that? I don't even know what that is.
Okay. It's a hidden feature in Windows 7, and it is the reason I'm mentioning it this week actually is because I've gotten so much email about it. It's funny to me how people discover this stuff. And Problem Steps Recorder exists because in business use, you can imagine this typical phone call, right? Someone calls help desk support and says, "Hey, when I'm using my computer, this application crashes. I don't know what's going on. I can't get my job done." And then they try to duplicate it back at help desk, and they can't because it works fine there. And what they have to do is send someone down to the guy's location. And maybe it's a remote location. It's very expensive, or maybe they have to VPN in or whatever they do. And when they get there, what they find out is the thing they were describing is not what was happening. And the reason nothing's working is because they're running Kazaa, or they've got some virus or whatever it is. So The problem steps recorder allows the person to essentially record what they're doing on the screen. It's not a video recording, but every time they click on anything or do anything, it takes a picture. And then it creates this HTML-based report that you can then mail to the help desk. So rather than sit there and try to explain it and explain it wrong, you can just send them this file. And then when they look at it, they can see exactly what happened, and they can find out what's going on. And it really kind of mitigates the whole back and forth and the time suck. So what's interesting about Problem Steps Recorder to me is, we all support our families and our friends, with the computers. And this is a way to do that same thing, but in a kind of a home or, like a family environment. And again, it's a hidden feature. You can't find Problem Steps Recorder in the Start menu. But if you go to Start menu search and just type in, problem steps, or if you start typing, let's see what it says. Problem steps. It will say the first item that comes up, the item that's selected says record steps to reproduce a problem. And that runs the Problem Steps Recorder. And it's super simple. You literally just click record, you do your stuff, click stop record when you're done. It creates the report. You can save it as a file, and then you can email it off. And it's just a cool little hidden thing that's in, it's in Windows 7, brand new to Windows 7. And it can help other people help you, essentially solve a problem.
Love that. I love that.
Neat stuff.
Very handy. And whenever there's a Windows 7 feature of the week, can a Windows 7 tip of the week be far behind?
No, it cannot, sir.
I thought not.
This week's tip of the week comes from Jeff Sprouse, and it's about TechNet subscriptions. Microsoft has two programs, one aimed at IT pros called TechNet, and another aimed at developers called MSDN. And one of the side benefits of these programs, if you subscribe, it's a yearly subscription, is it gives you access to a bunch of software. It's not for commercial use. So, if you can't take the version of Windows Server that you might get from this program and install it out on a public web server and serve up web pages for your business. But it's the type of thing that developers or IT pros would use to test software. And it comes with all the modern versions of Windows and Office and Server and all that stuff. But what's interesting about this stuff is if you want to use it like for personal use, actually it's okay to do that. And when you factor in the price, if you wanted to do something like get a bunch of copies of Windows 7 or a bunch of copies of Office, it actually kind of pays for itself.
It's a good deal. Yeah.
As long as you're not using it for commercial use. So, for example, the cheapest TechNet subscription is $350. But what you get with that is full versions of all of the versions of Windows 7, Windows Vista, and XP, Windows Server 2008 R2 and 2008 and 2003, Microsoft Office, and all the side standalone Office applications, and some other stuff. And you don't just get one copy of each. You can install these things up to 10 times each, at least with the client software. I think the server might be limited to 2 or 1 or 2. That's an incredible deal if you need a lot of that software. Again, not for commercial use. And $349. I mean, that's a crazy deal. Now it's a yearly subscription, but once they never run out. They're not time expired in any way.
So those serial numbers continue to work even after your subscription runs.
Yeah. No, this version is the I don't know what they call it, but it's like the online version. So you don't get discs in the mail. You have to go download the software online. But
just fine.
Basically, go grab one copy of each and then
burn it.
Yeah, and just make a note of all your product keys, and they'll work forever. But if you want, and as new versions come out, so for example, if you were to subscribe to this today and you would get Office 2007, in May, Office 2010 will become available. You just get that automatically as part of the subscription. Anything that ships during the lifetime of your subscription is added to the subscription.
Cool.
If you want to resubscribe next year, it's $249, so it's cheaper.
Oh, that's nice. A renewal.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we're TechNet subscribers, and it's really it is valuable. I was an MSDN subscriber for years. In fact, I still have, because they used to send you the stuff.
One of the things I'm dealing with in my closet is
that bookshelf.
I'm getting rid of stuff, and I have all these old versions of MSDN. It used to come in CD form.
In
that was
plastic
crazy.
Binders, and you'd get like
huge
10
things.
feet of binders.
Then they went to DVD, and that allowed them to consolidate a bit. But now I just do the online stuff. It's ridiculous.
Much easier. Much easier. Yeah, I had
those
an MSDN.
ISOs are awesome for installing in virtual machines.
Yeah. I had MSDN for years, and we just changed over to TechNet, which I don't know. I guess it's a little less expensive, and it doesn't have a lot of stuff.
It is less expensive. And On the MSDN side, you can go up. You know, there are very expensive subscriptions. You get everything they make, basically.
Yeah.
Including all the developer tools.
That's what we had. I had a universal subscription. Boy, that was nice.
Right. That's virtually everything they make. Yeah.
That was really nice. That's when I had lots of money. Because it was like $1,200 a year. It was not cheap.
Oh yeah, no, it's expensive. Yeah, but you know, $349 again. If it's a family type situation.
So for you can use it for non-commercial. Like you could use
non-commercial.
it. Wow. So you could like install Windows throughout the house for that. No, they don't mean it for that.
That's not obviously what it's aimed at. What I'm saying is you could use it for that.
You could do that without violating any moral precepts.
I believe so.
It's not one of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not misuse.
I would be able to sleep at night.
And that's all I care about. Because a sleepless Paul Thurrott is a grumpy Paul Thurrott. Hey,
Is an iPad reviewing.
I'm just, I still hurt that you called me a tool. Because I know you were thinking of me when you wrote the word tool.
You know what? That is not true. And it is not about you, Leo.
It's all about me, Paul. No, I didn't. But of course, naturally, it's so funny because anytime there's any perceived discord, I will get email from everybody saying, you know what Dvorak said about you, or people will send me clips. They'll send me, listen to what he said.
Of course,
because they really want us to fight.
There's sort of like a fake indignation that occurs.
Right.
I got an email from 2 or 3 people who said, screw you, to call me a name. And who the frick do you think you are? And I'm never, I read your stuff, and now I'm never going to read your stuff again. Signed, Bob at Mac.com. You know what, Bob? you were not reading my stuff. A, and B, what? What are you talking about?
Let's not take this personally, shall we?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. By the way, Mac.com, not me.com. I mean Mac.com. Really? Like, you've chosen to keep using this old name? Jeez.
It's all about me.com. I tried to get that, by the way. It's all about at me.com.
It's all about.
Yeah, somebody had already gotten it.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
We're going to take a little time out, do another pick, but it's going to be our Audible pick. We love Audible. Paul and I are both major Audible listeners. I'm still listening to Freedom TM from Daniel Suarez, which I love, but
awesome.
I loaded up my iPad with a bunch of books immediately because
you are
I'm a tool.
I don't want this to be a thing that comes between us.
It's too late, Paul. You've broken my heart. No. In fact, that's one of the things I do use the iPad for is
audiobooks.
Audiobooks, but the audiobooks will play on the Zune. They'll play on the Kindle. Many of the GPS devices. If you go to audible.com, audible.com, there's a device center link at the top, and they'll show you all the different devices. Off brands like Kawan, which is a Taiwanese MP3 player. Of course, the SanDiscs, the Sanzas, and so forth. Pretty much everything except Android devices, and I'm sure they're working on that.
And let's not forget, there is an enhanced audio format that is
love it.
Very, very nice.
That's what I'm downloading now that I have so much storage. So you got to, anyway, you can get, this is how this comes up. You can get a free book from Audible because they know that, you may say, well, I don't know. Would I enjoy audiobooks? I don't know. Let me try it before I
don't know.
I don't know. So what you do is you sign up for the gold account. It's audible.com/Windows. Don't get scared. You may say, well, wait a minute. They're signing up. No, you can cancel at any time. And you get to keep your first book's free, and you get to keep it. So there is no cost to you if you cancel in the first 30 days, and you get to keep that first book. Actually, you can cancel any time, but the first book is always yours. Any book you download is always yours to keep. So we like to give you a recommendation for the book you might want to try as your first audiobook. Now, is this something you're listening to?
It is. Yeah, I bought a bunch of audiobooks lately. That David Cross one from last week is not suitable for work.
Oh, okay, just a little warning.
But it is. It is one of the funniest things I've ever listened to, and my daughter checked on me. I did this on the iPad. Actually, I will often bring my iPhone up into the bathroom when I shave because I don't get to commute and I don't get a lot of time to listen to this stuff. And I was listening to this David Cross thing, and I was laughing, like a madman. And my daughter actually came up to check on me. She was concerned about the laughing coming from the bathroom. And it was because I was listening to David Cross. Anywho, this week's selection is from Andrew Zimmern, I always think of it as Zimmerman, but I guess it's Zimmern. And he is the host of the Travel Channel's Bizarre Food Show.
Oh, yeah.
He has a newer show that is bizarre of something else. But I actually, it's funny, you know, we actually watch a lot of these kind of travel/food type shows. And there is a weirdism to watching a guy eat something and then reacting to it and having to describe it to you when you can't taste it. You know, so they'll kind of nod their head knowingly and smile, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, this is really good," you know, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I guess so," you know. But this guy's actually really interesting, and he's traveled all over the world, and I really do buy into his contention that one of the greatest ways to experience other cultures is literally through their food, and it's one of the best parts about traveling. You know, when we go to Paris or anywhere else, you know, one of the great ways you could experience a place is through food, you know. So he's written a book called The Bizarre Truth, how I walked out the door mouth first and came back shaking my head. And a lot of it is around the travels that he goes on or went on, you know, for his book. So it's a lot of the same locations that he's talking about. And I really like the guy, and I wish there were more books like this that I could recommend. I've been looking for a good kind of travel dialogue type book, and this is a good one.
I love listening to travel books while I'm traveling, of all things.
Yeah, I do too.
Something fun about it. Let me play a little bit of this. Is Andrew Zimmern. He reads it.
Similar we all are under the surface circumstance of our lives. You can learn to appreciate life and be grateful. I want my son to know these stories, meet these people, see the world as it really is in African villages, European capitals, and Asian markets, because the way you'll learn how to live your life is by sharing it with others.
That's neat. That's a good philosophy for travel, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Andrew Zimmern, there's actually quite a few of his books on here. If you search for his name, you'll see there's a lot. But this is called The Bizarre Truth, and you can get it for free by going to audible.com/windows. This is what's great about Audible. 70,000 titles. These are all Andrew Zimmern titles. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. Actually, what it looks like they've done is they've taken the Bizarre Truth
excerpts,
and done
like
excerpts.
Chapter excerpts.
Oh, that's neat. So you could
so if you just want to hear about Japan or...
Yeah, what a good idea.
You can go to one.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at the price of those,
they're cheap.
You know, getting
a couple of bucks.
Is not, yeah, but you can get the full book.
Just get the whole book, right. Well, you can get it for free. Audible.com/Windows. Thank you, Audible, for supporting Windows Weekly. Okay, Paul, we got a couple of good software picks, at least two. Sometimes you sneak more in, so...
I did. I only have two this week. We were running a little long, but
it's that tent pole.
Yeah, because of the tent pole.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I'm looking over these two picks. They're almost like Mac switcher guide tips. You know, in a way,
good.
Which was not on purpose. But the first one is called iTunes Export. This is one that I found myself. I've been looking for, and there have been different things over the years for syncing content between iTunes and Zoom, because I do manage media collections in both. This does not sync between them, but what it allows you to do is you run this. It's actually an Adobe Air application.
Oh, interesting.
And it runs against the iTunes database. It gives you all of the playlists that you might have created in iTunes, and it allows you to export them in different formats. One of the neat things, and I actually don't know when this happened, but I export them into a format that Zune understands, and I put them in the Zune playlist folder. And when you do that, I think it's the Zune software. I'm not sure how this happens exactly, but it actually creates a version of the playlist that will work in Windows Media Player as well, and it happens automatically. So when you run this program, I do actually manage playlists in iTunes because I have an iPhone, and we have an Apple TV in the den and so forth, so there's some sense to having that be the center for that stuff. But I want those playlists to be available on the Zune HD, for example, and in the future on Windows Phone. So this software allows you to do that. It works great. It's free, obviously, and it works really well. So if you have any need to move between those two environments, I mean, this is one of those ways that you can do that.
And item 2.
This one, I just came in the other day. This is from a reader or a listener, Daniel Namaho. And it's got kind of an odd name. It's 3RVX. And what it does is basically duplicate or replicate that overlay that you see on the Mac OS 10 for the volume control. So if you have, so for example, on my computer, and I've installed this here, I actually have volume buttons on my keyboard.
Right, but there's no kind of visible
no feedback.
Yeah.
You know, anything's occurring. And what this does is it pops up this software overlay that's a graphical representation of the volume control, and it has a progress slider to indicate the volume going up and down, and it also beeps so you can hear how loud the audio is, which is a neat feature, just like it is on Mac OS X. Now, certain PCs actually have this functionality built in. So, for example, I'm testing a Lenovo ThinkPad Edge, and they have implemented this in themselves. I mean, it's something that Lenovo provides,
Right.
but it's not something that comes in Windows. And it is one of those things. I mean, if you've used Mac OS X, it's one of those neat little things, and it just provides the kind of feedback you would want when you're changing the volume. So it's free, and it's actually highly customizable too. You can change the way the thing looks. You can change whether it makes sounds, and there's all kinds of options you can set. So definitely worth checking out.
And Paul Thurrott, Windows SuperSite is definitely worth checking out. The SuperSite for Windows at winsupersite.com. That's Paul's wonderful site.
And also, don't forget, I'm writing a book about Windows Phone now, and if you would like to follow along, I am blogging about that process and about Windows Phone and about some of the stuff that's going on with the competition as well at windowsphonesecrets.com.
Oh, neat. There's a link on the SuperSite as well.
There is actually,
right on the left there.
on the right side of the SuperSite.
Paul Thurrott is the editor-in-chief of the SuperSite for Windows, winsupersite.com, also news editor for Windows IT Pro, and the author of a fabulous new book called Windows 7 Secrets, which I just put on my iPad, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
You know how I did it? I didn't do it in the Apple Store. I did it through the Kindle.
Yes.
And
I don't think my book is in the Apple Store, which I hear is common. By the way.
you're not the only one. There's like 30,000. They say 60,000, but 30,000 of them are.
I mean, the Kindle bookstore is awesome, and that's the compatibility.
I'm completely
between devices is done.
content to use that. Yeah, and there is there's no color in the screenshots, but there is color in your tables.
Yeah, like I said, it's probably a 2-color kind of thing.
It is. It's blue and blue, a little bit of blue.
Yeah. It's not great, but that's just the book. So,
but you still get the screenshots, and I think that this is great, and I can zoom in on the screenshots.
Zoom in, yeah.
So I mean, this is I think a really good thing for it. So that's how I bought it. Although I think I also have the hardcover, the soft cover, which is very handy for holding the door open over there.
Yes, and actually, as winter comes, it's also good for kindling.
I will wait until Windows 8. How about that?
Okay.
Paul Thurrott, thank you so much for being here. Sorry about all the iPad discussion, folks.
No. Oh, yeah. Well, I apologize for that as well. But, now that we've got that out of our collective systems,
we're done.
We can move on.
Yeah, right. We'll see. Everybody's saying you should have Paul on Mac Break Weekly so he can give the fanboys a little juke.
Yeah. No, honestly, I think the way those conversations work out in real life is you imagine that we will argue.
Yeah, we don't.
But, one of the things you can do as an adult is just, sometimes you disagree, and that's life, and you move on, and it's okay,
Well, I'm trying not to be an adult, but I'm sorry that I've failed so far.
To be an adult.
Thanks, Paul. We'll see you next time, everybody, on Windows Weekly.